In 1797, Captain Jonathan Carnes sailed into Salem, Massachusetts from Indonesia on a ship very much like this. In his hull, he brought with him a huge load of pepper. With that act, Salem became the center of international spice trade in North America. Sure, one could say that economics played a large part in bringing spices directly from Asia, but who could have thought at that time about things such as the geography of food, or political policies for imports, or the social aspects of food? 200 years later, Americans still demand spices as well as meat and produce from international sources. Today, a significant percentage of food comes from beyond our borders. With the recent Food Safety Modernization Act, the federal government has rewritten the book on enforcing strict quality standards. The Farm Bill introduced a provision that strengthened the requirement for country of origin labeling on many foods. Other food labeling issues, such as the food safe handling labels and the GMO labeling, which the state of Vermont just passed a law saying that it was a requirement for their state. Well, these changes are a result of consumer demand. Though some 80% of Americans support the idea of strengthening the government's ability to regulate food, not all in the food industry agree. When President Teddy Roosevelt pushed for the passage of the Meat Inspection and the Pure Food and Drug Acts of 1906, he ran up against some significant resistance from the industry. In a note to Upton Sinclair, with whom the president communicated frequently, Roosevelt told Sinclair that the specific evils you point out shall, if their existence be proved, and if I have the power, be eradicated. Later, in statements to Congress, Roosevelt added to his thoughts on regulating industry. Unfortunately, the misdeeds of those who are responsible for the abuses we design to cure will bring discredit and damage not only upon them, but upon the innocent stock growers, the ranchmen and farmers of this country. The only way permanently to protect and benefit these innocent stock growers, these farmers and ranchmen, is to secure by law the thorough and adequate inspection for which I have asked. The work I did with the USDA as a federal policy advisor on meat and poultry inspection taught me a few things. Most federal regulatory policy is written with very significant involvement of the very industries being regulated. The industry took great steps, as we talked about in week 4, to prevent the federal regulation of food safe handling labels to educate consumers in the face of growing food safety concerns. Most of the resistance from the big corporations involved in preventing federal testing and holding regulations are concerned about the impact on small to medium processing plants. This is kind of odd, seeing as how these small businesses represent only a very small percentage of the food industry. To quote Michael Pollan and Eric Schlosser from their 2010 New York Times op-ed article, "A Stale Food Fight," does the food industry really want to sabotage the efforts to ensure the safety of 99% of that marketplace because it is so deeply concerned about the underregulation of 1%? Pollan and Schlosser also go on to point out that the largest outbreaks are routinely caused by the largest processors, not by small processors selling their goods at farmers markets. What does this look like in terms of big corporations and food safety? In 2002, the ConAgra Beef Company recalled over 350,000 pounds of ground beef contaminated with E. coli. Later that year, the USDA pressured ConAgra to recall another 19 million pounds of ground beef due to illnesses in 6 states. In 2008, Hallmark Westland Meat Packing Company recalled over 143 million pounds of beef. This is the single largest recall of meat in U.S. history. In 2011, Cargill recalled almost 36 million pounds of ground turkey products contaminated with salmonella. In February 2014, Rancho Feeding Corporation recalled over 8.75 million pounds of beef products. In April of 2014, Tyson Foods Incorporated recalled more than 75,000 pounds of chicken. These are large quantities and large corporations. Most Americans believe that the USDA's stamp of approval means that testing has taken place and the item was only released after the test results proved that the products were safe. This, however, is not true. The stamp only means that a sample was taken from the lot from which the product came. This is why we have so many meat recalls every single year. Contaminated product would not need to be recalled if it were held until a sample was tested and that testing was completed and analyzed. I should point out that according to the USDA, over 410 million pounds of meat have been recalled in the last decade. Over 410 million pounds of meat have been recalled in just the last decade. Unfortunately, only a small fraction of that meat has actually been recovered. I know that I talk about meat a great deal, seeing as how this is the industry for which I was involved in regulatory policy, but a simple look at the last 3 years in food recalls reveals that many other non-meat food products are recalled, sometimes surprising sources and unbelievable amounts. The list includes fresh cilantro, peanut butter, hazelnut and mixed nut products, processed onion products, whole tomatoes, bagged salads, chocolate protein monster beverages, fresh jalapenos, iced tea, bag-in-the-box concentrates, Aunt Jemima frozen pancakes, hard-cooked eggs, fresh alfalfa sprouts and cello-packed spinach, organic grape tomatoes, chopped romaine lettuce, cut wedge potatoes, pizza crusts, cucumbers, bagged spinach, cantaloupes, and 26 million pounds of shredded and block cheese. So, to take a look at the relationship between the government and the food industry from a different perspective, I want to point out that some key players in the food industry have taken action on many occasions without the need to be told to do so by federal laws or policies. In 1998, Beef Products Incorporated was the first company in the beef industry to test for E. coli 0157H7 and hold meat until the results were in. 13 years later, they were the first meat company to test for 6 non-0157 strains of E. coli and did so before the USDA banned those strains from ground beef. Elsewhere in the supply chain, the retail giant Costco has long implemented its own test and hold policy. I've met and talked with Craig Wilson. He is Costco's Director of Food Safety out of their headquarters in Issaquah, Washington. He told me that customers demand safe, quality products, and because of the nature and size and quantity of products, of meats, different foods purchased at Costco, the products tend to be held on to longer in families' freezers, refrigerators, and pantries. A pathogen in peanut butter or meat or anything else could have a far greater impact on customers' health as well as customers' loyalty to shopping at Costco. Still, this is an example of when business acted ahead of government, and the public is safer as a result. We've examined many topics throughout this course, but we've always been careful to keep our eyes focused on the economic, political, geographic, and social aspects of change within the food industry. While it is easy to believe that the political, geographical, and economic influence will always have a major impact on the food industry, one cannot lose sight of the social impact. Much change has come about due to the voice of the consumer. After all, the food industry would not exist if not for the demand of the consumer. I wish to end with one final thought, one that has its start over 100 years ago. In describing the jungle, the London Times evaluated Upton Sinclair's novel and thus the American meat industry by saying that, unhappily, we have good reason for believing it to be all fact, not fiction. The things described by Mr. Sinclair happened yesterday, are happening today, and will happen tomorrow and the next day until some Hercules comes to cleanse the filthy stable. Some Hercules is not a journalist, a book, a university course, a legislator, a federal agency, or even an act of Congress. You, the agents of change in our food industry, are the Hercules that American consumers depend on to cleanse the filthy stable. Thank you.